Gregg Allman, lead singer of the Allman Brothers Band, married Cher, the biggest pop star in Hollywood, in 1975. Everyone thought they would become a famous couple because she was a rebellious rock star with a wild lifestyle and he was a beautiful entertainment icon. But after only 9 days, Cher asked for a divorce. What took place when the doors were closed? How could a love that looked so good fall apart in less than 2 weeks? Gregg Allman said, "I was the one who made everything go wrong. But was it really that easy? Is love really enough to win when drugs, alcohol and deep-seated disagreements enter a relationship?" It wasn't just a bad marriage. This was a story about love, hopes and the bitter truth that loving someone doesn't always mean you can stay on the same road. Let's find out what's really going on in Gregg Allman and Cher's troubled marriage. Gregg Allman said, "She was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. As soon as he met Cher for the first time in 1975, he was hooked. Not a fairy tale love story though. It wasn't love at first sight. It was more like a storm, passionate, furious and hard to keep up." That year, Cher and Sonny Bono had been married for over 10 years and had just completed their divorce. After only 4 days, she met Gregg Allman, lead singer of the Allman Brothers Band, which was one of the most important Southern rock bands at the time. Gregg was enthralled by Cher from the start. She was strong, independent, had a great image, and had an irresistible charm that made him want to be with her. To him, he never thought he could reach Cher. She was like a dream he could never reach. But the unexpected did happen. They were pulled toward each other like opposite forces, and they couldn't fight it. But it was clear from the start that they were not the same. Cher came from Hollywood, a world of glamour and success where work, looks and fame were everything. Even though Gregg was a rock star, he was from a totally different world. Dirty, disrespectful, and not following any rules. It wasn't something he was interested in, and he didn't want to be connected to Cher's famous life either. But love doesn't always make sense. They fell deeply and quickly in love with each other, not thinking about what might happen next. And their hastiness made them make a choice they hadn't given much thought to. They got married quickly because they were so in love. After only a few days of meeting, the wedding took place in a small church in Las Vegas on June 30, 1975. Not many details were planned or thought out ahead of time, just two people who were moved by their feelings. Still, Cher filed for divorce 9 days later, which came as a surprise. The entertainment business was shocked. There wasn't much time for anything to happen. Gregg Allman's heroin abuse was the main reason. Cher knew right away that she couldn't live with a man who was abusing drugs and booze, no matter how much she loved him. She did not want to go through the pain of her last marriage again, and she also did not want to be a part of Gregg's chaos. Also, it became clearer that they lived very different lives. Cher was a famous person all over the world who was always on TV and at important events, but Gregg didn't feel like he belonged in that world. He liked music a lot. He didn't want to be a part of the flash and noise of Hollywood. When they saw this harsh truth, they chose to leave, but the story didn't stop there. Cher didn't want to get a divorce for another week, but she did. She couldn't just give up on a love that was so strong. They both knew that they could start over if they could work out their differences. So Cher took back her divorce suit and worked to fix their relationship. She did everything she could to help Gregg fight his problem for more than 2 years. She talked to professionals and learned how to help an addict. She then tried to break him out of the loop of drinking and drug use. Gregg couldn't change though. They loved each other so much that they had a son, Elijah Blue Allman, but their love wasn't strong enough to keep them together. Cher was worn out. After a while of being a mother, taking care of Gregg and working, she realized she couldn't keep putting other people before herself. In 1977, they finally split up with Gregg Allman. In 1979, after 2 years of marriage, they got a divorce. Gregg Allman and Cher loved each other deeply, without thinking, and in a way that broke our hearts. They threw everything they had into the relationship, but they couldn't get past how different they were. Gregg once told me that I was to blame for everything going wrong, but was that the whole truth? Their marriage did not just fail, it taught me a hard lesson about love and things I can't change. Passion can burn strongly, but if it doesn't have a strong base, it can go out as quickly as it came on. From the start, Gregg Allman and lived in 2 different worlds, and they couldn't get together no matter how hard they tried. In a later interview, Gregg freely stated that he could never live in Beverly Hills' fancy way of life, just like Cher could never give up the spotlight to live a quiet life in the American South. He loved the simple things in life, like small diners, the sound of blues music in bars, and being free to travel with his guitar. Cher, on the other hand, had a lot to do with the glamorous world of A-list celebrities, where every party was a red carpet event and looks were always the most important thing. This caused strange events to happen. When Cher took Gregg to events with a lot of people, he often felt out of place because of the forced small talk and the flashing lights of the camera. On the other hand, when Gregg tried to bring Cher to the South, she had a hard time fitting in with a group of people who didn't care about fame or the newest fashion styles. It became even clearer how different they were when a much bigger problem came up: Gregg's addiction. Their different lives were a problem, but drugs were what brought their marriage to the edge of breaking up. Not long after they got married, Cher found out that Gregg wasn't just a great singer, he was also struggling with heroin. Addiction to drinking. It wasn't just her husband being tough, she was in a fight she could never win. Cher tried everything she could to help Gregg get clean. In order to save him, she talked to professionals, called rehab centers, and even changed some parts of her own life. It was all in vain though. Gregg didn't want to change, and even if he did, he couldn't. It was a bad interview, Cher once said. I can't try to save someone who doesn't want to be saved through my whole life. In addition to their different lives and drug problems, their jobs also made them less close. Cher was a great singer, but she wasn't happy with that. She wanted to become an actress, build her own brand, and have more of an impact on many different entertainment businesses. To keep her stand, she worked non-stop and was always looking for new jobs. At the same time, Gregg was only interested in Southern rock and going on tours. No, he didn't want to be tied to the Hollywood entertainment machine, and he didn't care about Cher's movies or high-end endorsement deals. He once said that he didn't get why Cher was so interested in fancy parties and events where everyone only talked about fashion and fame. Cher, on the other hand, thought Gregg was too stuck in his own world, refused to do the things she really wanted to do. Even though they tried to find something they had in common, they couldn't, and the gap between them grew. It wasn't a surprise when their marriage ended in the end. They loved each other, but they couldn't live together. Gregg Allman could never give up the free-spirited life of a rock star, and Cher could never get lost in a life that wasn't hers. Because they couldn't get along, they had addictions that they couldn't beat, and their career goals took them in different ways. They couldn't stay together. Passion can bring two people together, but it doesn't always mean they'll stay together. Gregg was honest when he said that most of his marriages didn't last because of one easy thing: he wouldn't change. The women who came into his life liked him just the way he was. A free soul, he was a passionate artist who never followed what other people thought of him. But over time, they wanted him to change into someone else, more responsible, more stable, and more in charge of himself, and he could never accept that. They liked me just the way I was, but they wanted me to change, and I couldn't. Gregg has been married 6 times, which is a shocking fact. He only suggested it once. In all of them, including his marriage to Cher, it was his partner who asked him to marry her. This fact makes me think of a good question. When it came to marriage, did Gregg Allman really want to get married, or was he just going with the flow? Gregg always said that he was a tough guy to be around. He had always loved music more than anything else, and any woman who came into his life had to be okay with that. He said once that music was everything to him, and that nothing could change that. This may have been part of his appeal to the women who loved him at first. He was a passionate artist who wasn't afraid to show his feelings, but in the end, they weren't able to be stable or have a real family life like they had hoped. What do you think about the point of view of Gregg Allman? When two people are in love, do they really accept each other as they are? If they don't, do they try to change them into something else? Following the end of their marriage, Cher and Gregg Allman went in very different directions. Cher quickly got back on track and continued to shine, while Gregg dealt with long-lasting personal problems, such as addiction and a string of failed marriages. It's clear now that their split didn't have the same effect on them as it did at the time. One rose taller and stronger, while the others looked like they were stuck in the same bad loops. She didn't let the pain of her failed marriage to Gregg stop her from pursuing her job. Soon after they broke up, she came back to fame with a string of #1 hits, solidifying her position as one of the best acts in the business. 2 years after she broke up with Gregg, Cher released the album Take Me Home in 1979. The title track was one of her biggest hits. The happy disco song was a change in her style that showed she wasn't just a pop singer but an artist who could adapt to new styles. Cher continued to have a lot of success in the 1980s. After that, she became an actress. For her part in Moonstruck in 1988, she won the Academy Award for Best Actress. With hits like If I Could Turn Back Time, in 1989, she kept making waves in the music world, one of her most popular songs ever. It looked like her failed marriage to Gregg made her stronger, more independent, and free from the restrictions of any relationship. It didn't seem to have hurt her work. While she was single, she didn't rush into getting married again. After her divorce from Gregg, she dated a number of famous people, such as Gene Simmons of Kiss and actor Tom Cruise, but she never got married again. Cher seemed to know that she wasn't tied down to be happy, which made her look even stronger to everyday people. While Gregg Allman got worse with his drug and drinking problems, Cher got over her breakup. While he was married to Cher, his problem was already out of hand, but it got even worse after they split up. Unfortunately, his bad habits not only put a stop to his work, but it had a big effect on his personal life too. While he was married 4 more times after Cher, none of those marriages were stable in the long term. In 1979, just 2 years after they broke up, Gregg married Julie Bindus again. He seemed to be trying to find security in this marriage after his relationship with Cher was very unstable. Delilah Island Allman was their daughter, but they broke up after a while. In 1981, after only 2 years together, they got a divorce, which was Gregg's third bad marriage. After almost 10 years, he married Danielle Galliano for the 4th time in 1989. He had somewhat gotten back in control of his addiction by that time, but their differences still made the relationship impossible to keep going. In 1994, after 5 years together, they broke up. Gregg never seemed to give up on the idea of getting married for good. Since his divorce from Cher, he has been married to Stacey Fountain since 2001. They were married for almost 7 years, but in 2008 split up because of problems in their personal lives and differences in how they lived. Gregg got married 6 times, and the last time to Shannon Williams, a woman 40 years younger than him. On a sad note, they got married in 2017. In the same year, Gregg died after having problems with his liver cancer. Gregg Allman was married more than once, but he never really found security. His old problems kept coming back to haunt him, and even after years of recovery from addiction, he couldn't keep a marriage together. It's clear that Cher and Gregg Allman went in very different directions after they split up. Cher's business took off, and she became more independent and strong.